Okay, all right, let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to the Zowe version 2.11 system demo. We have a number of squads that are going to be presenting. I'm sharing the agenda on the screen right now, but I'll stop sharing and then I'll hand it over to the IntelliJ squad, who's going to be first up. Vladislav, are you presenting?
Yes. Hello. Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. For this kind of upcoming release or this release, we have a new version of our plugin for the IntelliJ IDEA. It's version 1.1, first minor release after the major 1.0 release. There is a quite many different changes, bug fixes, and other stuff to present. But today I'm gonna concentrate on the things that are mostly notable, and I'm going to show how it works real time. Right after that, I believe I would be able to present the structural changes for the Kotlin SDK in schematic version of the presentation. So let's start from the plugin itself. There are some new features that are basically the most notable from this release. They are introduced in this version. First of all, we've introduced such kind of templates for data sets. So where we are creating something from scratch, we will be able to select some kind of predefined parameters for the data set to be allocated. This feature we are calling as presets for data sets creation. The next thing, firstly, it was addressed as a GitHub issue, but we've decided to separate it into two parts. And one of them is an HLQ as the default mask during the mask creation. It also will be presented a little later. The third major change is a password change feature for the newest version of ZOS. It is 2.5 right now. And the last but not least item in the main new features list is copy with conflict resolve strategy feature. So how does it look like? For things like default HLQ and presets, it will be quite easy to notice. So when we are creating a data set from scratch or allocating one from the one we have already, I already set up all the environmental things I need to present all the features. So right now I'm having a connection with a walk-in set. Under that I have some masks, and I've selected the create new dataset item from context menu. In here we have a dialog window with some changes such as new field, choose preset, and selecting the preset from the list. We have our other fields changed, and basing on the item selected in here, it will be something different. Yeah, like that. So we can create something like a sequential dataset with template parameters, PDS dataset, also with empty member, and with sample GCL member dataset inside. So in here we have some fields changing, and also if we select the last one, it will create a dataset, and inside of it, it will be a member with a GCL, predefined GCL inside of it. So we don't need to search for template GCL to change it later and submit. Next thing is mask creation. So in here, before the version 1.1, we didn't have any mask defined at the create mask dialog window, and now it now it
Yeah, you
gets...
should be good.
Sorry, Timothy. Maybe some problems. Okay, and before we didn't have any value inside of that field, and right now it's the username HLQ with the dot asterisk. Also, it is working the same for the add work insert dialog window, and here when we are add new mask, it adds the new field where we can see that it is predefined already. Next thing is password change feature. So in here we have settings for the plugin, and I have already predefined the connection to the mainframe with ZOS version 2.5. And when I try to edit that connection, I have a new button at the bottom of that dialog window. And when I click on that, I have some things to define myself. First one is old password. It's, of course, the password that we currently have. And the next two fields is to define the new password. After that, the request is being sent to OSMF, and all the things regarding that user is changed. But I won't be presenting how it works, as this is our functional user, but you can try it yourself. And what I'm missing here. Yeah, it's copy with conflict resolve strategy. It's the biggest feature we've introduced since this version. So in here I have some data sets with members inside. This feature works both for datasets, members, USS files, and folders. So I'm going to present this feature on members inside of different datasets. So for example, if I have some structure inside of one dataset and I want to copy some member inside of some different dataset, I can just click copy or Control-C and then Control-V to that dataset. Okay, it's being copied. Yeah, right now we have the same member but in different dataset, and if we try to do so another one time, it says that we have name conflicts in one file. In here, some options introduced, such as skip for all. It means that the member or any entity that you're trying to copy or move, the operation won't be proceed, and the members or some other entities are not being copied or moved. Override for all, it means that we are overwriting the content of any of the members. And decide for each, it's the option to decide what we should do with each of the entity. For example, here I want my member to be overwritten, so I click here. If I try to do so again, I can select use new name, and it creates the member with the new name. It will be the same as this one. And of course, if I click skip, it doesn't do anything. Okay, so that's it for main features. And some notable features are this one addressing GitHub issue with HTTP connection support. We didn't have that before, and right now we are able to create both secure and unsecure connections on demand. Some encoding feature changes brought to the plugin with this version. Basically, most of them are about warning the user that he or she are about to change something in the file contents. So to do some warning, we have a dialog window that says that the user is about to do something. And some things like in backend side of the plugin are synchronization feature revokes and login enhancements. And I guess that's it for the most notable features of the new version of the plugin. And moving right to the next item in the list today, we are about to change our Kotlin SDK, Zowe Client Kotlin SDK, from the structural point of view. So for now, we have some things that are highly coupled between each other. Some of them represent some kind of specification. Some of them are just coupled for the historical reasons. And for that reasons, we are going to introduce some new structure. For example, in here right now, we have SDK specification written upon retrofit2 library. This thing is communicating with the OSMF REST API. It introduces some kind of interface that is highly merged with retrofit2. And all the things like jobs, files, and other implementations are just things that will be implemented later somewhere else, if we are talking about this one. And also with the newest version of the Kotlin SDK, version 0.4, we've introduced some kind of already implemented functions that are situated inside of the SDK in the different module. And as you can see, for the plugin that is being running on the IntelliJ IDEA part, we are implementing the SDK specification ourselves inside of the plugin. And for the other plugin, for Jenkins, it's the DevOps plugin. We have some core features implemented that are working with the implementation we have in our latest version of the Kotlin SDK. So to change the things, we have some thoughts about how it will be structured, and the new image will be looking better, as we have some discussions already across the Zowe also, and we are about to introduce some kind of specification interfaces for each of the entities on the mainframe part. The specification will be a different structure that will introduce some kind of template methods to communicate with any features on the mainframe side. Kotlin SDK is basically will be some kind of shell under that specification that will introduce some implementation methods for the interaction with any part of the ZOS. It's either the OSMF or some other parts like kicks, like RSE API, and so on. So in here we have two plugins that will be looking like that. We will have core implementation to work with specification interfaces, and with that they will communicate with the Kotlin SDK to get some information from the OSMF or to write something to that endpoint. So I guess that's it for me. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, so the next squad is the CLI squad. Who's going to be presenting there?
Hi, give me a second. Okay. Okay. Do you guys see VS Code?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So the feature that I'm going to demo today is a new one, Zowe Files Edit. And I guess we'll just do this. It is a command that allows you to locally edit any mainframe dataset or USS file. And right now I'm just going to be demoing the editing a dataset. So this command requires you to set an editor, but you can set one as the default. Also, it has logic for editing conflicts. So if you're locally editing something and someone else is, there will be some conflict resolution there. So I'm on this test system here, and I'm going to edit this testing file. To do so, I will write Zowe files edit dataset, the dataset name, and which editor I'll be using. It should bring it up. Oh, sorry, I had to pretend that that didn't pop up yet because I forgot to delete the stash. But basically, this is the file, and I brought it up in my temporary stash, which is kind of just explaining how the command works. Basically, there's just a version of this file downloaded locally, which is the stash. And this is what is used for conflict detection. But if I make my changes here, local, save it, overwrite with local edits, say yes, and then successfully uploaded. If I pull from mainframe, I'll see that my mainframe file now has local, and this is the old version that I was just editing that no longer exists because once I upload my file to the mainframe, it gets rid of my local version, like my stash. So apologies if that was kind of confusing, but I have a couple more examples, so maybe it will make more sense in a second. But you can also edit not just in, your editor, but say you want to edit directly in the terminal, you can do so with Vim or something else. And basically the same process will happen. So I don't really want to totally go through this example. So what is it? I always forget how to do this. Quit. Because I didn't really make any edits, I'm going to say no here. And this part is actually kind of interesting. Exiting now, temp file will persist for editing. So I basically, because I didn't override anything from the mainframe, I still have my local version that I was working with. And say that somebody else, we're going to pretend to be somebody else right now. They decided to make their own changes. I just wrote local 2, and then down here you see dataset uploaded successfully. It actually just went away, but Zowe Explorer has that nice little functionality there. I'm using Zowe Explorer at the same time as I'm using the CLI. I'm sorry, I kind of didn't explain that at the beginning. But basically, going back to my editor, I'm person 2, I'm making these edits. Now, say I want to re-edit in Vim. I decided, I want to keep working with my stash. This is telling me that there's a difference between what I've done and what currently persists on the mainframe. So by entering yes, you'll see that somebody else actually put 2 here so that my local version deviates from what I thought previously existed. And now that I see that, if I decide to overwrite with local file, quit. It reminds me, like, don't forget that actually you are overwriting what somebody else's updates, and you do have to confirm that that is what you're intent on doing. So there is some conflict resolution here. Also, every time writing editor, this flag could be kind of irritating, and maybe you don't want to do that. Well, you can set this Zowe editor to be, for example, VS Code, so that the next time you write or use your command, if that's your default editor, all you have to do is, sorry, let me get rid of that. All you have to do is write the beginning of the command without the flag of editor, and you'll still be able to work with your files. Okay, apologies for that. I hope, are there any questions? Sorry.
So is this a local copy of the file that you have to upload after you make changes?
Local copy of file that I have to upload.
Right, or are you actually editing this on the mainframe?
Oh, right. Okay, so you pull down and create a temp file on your machine. That is a local copy of the file on the mainframe. You then overwrite it with your version.
So you make your change and then you save it and then it automatically uploads back in?
Yes.
Yes, you have to confirm that it is what you, sorry, that's the wrong one. You do have to confirm that you're overwriting.
Okay.
It's
I'm
not
sorry,
automatic.
I missed that.
Oh, it's okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, this is a part of our latest release, so look out for that. And thanks for watching the demo. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I see for CLI, there's another presentation, multiple login ops.
Yes, I can present that, Nick.
Okay, all right, I will make you co-host. Hey, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
So I just want to briefly show some enhancements that were made in the latest release of Zowe CLI related to support of the API remediation layer. So the first thing I want to show is support for unique cookie identifiers. These were added in a recent update of the API remediation layer. And so they allow this token type to have a unique ID appended to the end. So for example, a .1, or in this image down here, we have a .2. And so this allows, if a user is connected to different API ML instances, they can have separate token types to distinguish between the two. And previously, Zowe CLI would only support a token type that was API ML authentication token without the suffix. And we've now made the enhancement to allow support for the suffix, and it can be any number. A second enhancement that was made was to support multiple login operations in a single Zowe config secure command. And so I'll show this as well. Sorry about the quality of this GIF, is a little weird. But hopefully you can see that I'm able to run the Zowe config secure command. And in this case, I have a configuration set up for connecting to two different mainframe LPARs. And like each one of them has their own API ML instance. And so previously, this scenario would not have been supported. There was an assumption in place where the Zowe config secure command could not prompt you for the API ML login for more than one instance. It would only do so for the first API ML instance that it found in your file. In this case, that would have been LPAR1, and then it would have skipped over the second one. So now with this enhancement, you can have as many API ML instances configured as you want in a single Zowe configuration JSON file, and you'll be prompted for login for all of them. Now, these enhancements that I've mentioned, they're not present in Zowe Explorer yet, but we do hope in a future release to make the same enhancement shortly and have support for multiple API ML instances in a single VS Code workspace, as well as support for the unique cookie identifier there as well. But that's all for what I wanted to show. Are there any questions?
With the support for multiple API mediation layer connections, does that mean you've brought in the support for multiple base profiles, or is this just set up in like a profile property, and then you can have your separate profiles before? What does the config file look like with these changes?
Sure. Let me if I quickly make some changes to this file, I would be able to show it here. I believe there would be support for either method. So as you mentioned, you could have multiple base profiles, although then you kind of have to switch back and forth depending on which one you want to currently be active. You would have to change your default base profile. So I can go ahead and show, I believe I'm sharing my whole screen, so hopefully you can see my VS Code here. And so with this configuration that I have here, I'm using what we call nested profiles, where I have one at the top level for LPAR1. Inside of that, I have a profile for each of the services that are on the LPAR1 API mediation layer. Right now, I just have OSMF, but there could be lots of other services running there. And then I can have a token stored here in that LPAR1 profile. So it will apply to any services that are running on LPAR1. And I have the same setup for LPAR2 then. And
awesome.
I believe this is what we would want to support in Zowe Explorer as well, and we'll hopefully have in the next release or two.
Very cool. Thanks, Timothy.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, is that it, Timothy?
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, the next squad is the API ML squad. I think, Pablo, you're up.
Yes, okay. So can I share the screen?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, 1 second, please. One second, please. I'm finding, yeah, this one. Yeah. Okay, hopefully you can see the screen now.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have a presentation. This is more some announcements and regarding advance that we have in the work that we're doing around logging, improving logging in API mediation layer, and helping us troubleshoot potential issues. Based on some customer feedback, we've seen that many of the issues are around different topics, right? So we started by categorizing them, and the first one we tackled was the OSMF configuration. So there are new messages that are more granular and more specific to different situations. I cannot show all of them, but I will show just here a couple of examples of the changes, and then I will show the documentation where you can find all the other codes that we are providing now. What we're trying to accomplish here is to clean up the logging and making it more meaningful for the users and the people who are reading these logs to understand when issues happen. So the first scenario is normal startup. The change here is that the gateway service started. This message will appear after the OSMF connection was successful. The difference here is because usually when OSMF is not available for any reason, in previous versions, you would see the message that the gateway was started. But in reality, since OSMF was not available, the services cannot be provided. So the gateway would start a loop of restarting, basically, right? And it will shut down because OSMF was not configured. Then the launcher component would restart that component and start over. And this would happen indefinitely. So for clearness, we've added this message after OSMF is now registered correctly. Otherwise, the gateway can be considered as not started. Second one is around OSMF connection issues. This is wrong configuration or OSMF is not reachable in the network. The difference here is that before we were showing many messages here and stat traces. Now this should be just one log, and the issue should be here in this line, and it has a code assigned to it. So in the documentation, this code can be found and worked upon, and it has a few recommendations. I will show this again in the documentation in a short while. And the third scenario, which is quite common, is to have wrong TLS around certificate configuration, this being not trusting OSMF certificate. And again, before we were showing full stack traces, and this could be troublesome for some people to read. So now again, we have a specific message that prints here in the log what you should do in case you see it, things to verify. And again, something that before was not done is that this has a specific message code to troubleshoot with reasons on why this happened and the actions to do. And these messages, for example, if I can show this last one, is now documented here live in the 2.11. So again, the message is quite similar, but there's a reason and some action to take by the users. And this repeats on different situations that can happen with OSMF. So you can see here, for example, there were messages that regarding change password that were not caught before, and now they are, and they have the code here. So this is the entire presentation for the changes in the logging. If you have any questions, otherwise I will switch to the other one. Okay, so the second demo is around the change in the property that we were using with the wrong meaning in API layer. This just a disclaimer, this does not affect the strictness in the default setup. So strict mode is still working like it was always working fine. The difference in this case is only if there is a standalone API layer without Zowe. That's if anyone is using it like that, then the property for non-strictness was fixed, and now basically the difference applies mostly for if you want to run it in non-strict mode. The non-strict is to validate that the certificates are signed by the trusted authority, but it can skip matching of the host name in the common name or the subject alternates. And yeah, we were using the wrong value here, but this is just to let you know in case you were using this value, just be aware, and that from this version, the meaning is corrected. So then the defaults are affect only files, so the start.sh files for the components, and this configuration was managed in the Zowe YAML by the verify value, right? So there was no direct use of this property anyway. So that's it from my side. If you have any questions, happy to answer. Otherwise, back to you. So back to you, Nick, I guess.
Okay, looks like there's one more from your squad. Conformance
Yes.
validation for onboard services.
Yeah. Hello everyone. This is Shobha. Today I'm going to present the verification validation of conformance criteria from APML.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is basically a part of internship, and it was done by our intern Matthew. Unfortunately, he was not available today, so I'm presenting it on his behalf. So as we all know, conformance defines a set of standards to be followed by any onboarded services to APML. Here we are providing some endpoint for users to verify if their services are conformant or not. So we are basically concentrated on 3 criteria in this project. So basically, the first one is for the naming convention. The name should be of it should not be more than 64 bytes, 64 characters, and it should not have any special characters, and it should be of small letters. And I'm gonna run. Running it locally. I'm running it against some local services that we onboarded to APML. So here I'm checking it against the metric services, which has special characters. So it's giving that service ID contains symbols or uppercase letters. And I have one more for the naming convention. It is bigger than 64, and it's giving that it's not conformant because it's it has it's longer than 64 characters. And the second one is on the it should contain the the proper Swagger definition. If it is not, it's gonna give a error message based on that. And here I'm running another services. It's giving there is a problem with Swagger documentation. And there is another criteria that we have covered, that is whether it's SSO enabled. And I'm running this service, and it's giving an error message that it's trying to call this endpoint, and it's returning it returns 401, and it's not conformant. And that's all from me. Hello, am I audible?
Okay, all right.
Yep.
If there's
Okay.
Is that it?
Yes, that was the presentation.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, the next squad is the Web UI squad. I think that's Sakshi. And I think you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Yeah, hello. All right, so I'll share my screen. So I'm going to give you guys a demo for Zen. So I'm sharing my screen. Just let me know if it's visible.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
we can see it.
All right, yeah. So Zen, it's Zowe Enterprise Necessity, and it is used, it's basically a user interface for installing Zowe, and it basically helps the customer and makes the process smooth and easier. So as we see in the screen, we have 6 stages, which is connection, planning, installation, configuration, certificate, and initialization. So it's still in progress. All right, let's get started with the connection. So here, the basic details like the host, the port number, the username, and password. So this will get validated. Yeah, so post validation, we are going to continue. And here, the second stage is planning. So here we can submit the JCL, and according to our requirements, according to the security requirements and all, we can submit the JCL and we can modify it. So for a while, I'm going to proceed to the next step. Okay, so this is about installation. So here we are going to give all the details which is required in order to install the MVS datasets, and it is a crucial part for installing Zowe. So all the details which goes in Zowe.yaml will be presented over here. So we have all of them. Each of this will is having all the validations which are required. We are also working on the editor. So for example, like in the editor, the user or the customer can simply paste their YAML and they need not really fill the form. So it's just optional. The user can either fill the form or paste the YAML over here. And inside this YAML as well, we have all the validations, the YAML validation, the schema validations that are required. All right, so this is the installation. The next one is configuration. Currently in the configuration, we have the security configuration, but we are planning to add more configuration, basically all the configuration that goes into Zowe.yaml. So here as well, the same thing goes like the installation step. We have the editor. User can choose to fill the form or paste the YAML, the pre-existing YAML in the editor. And yeah, so we have got also this is dynamically generated. So for example, if there is anything, any changes in the schema in the future, it will be reflected here by default. And last step is certificates, and the UI is similar for the previous 2 steps that we have discussed, the installation and the configuration. So we have all the attributes which is present in the schema and basically in the Zowe.yaml over here with all the validations, and yeah, and similarly we have the editor as well, which is similar to the previous 2 steps that we have seen. So as I said, this application is still in progress. So we are still working on it, and we have some plans for it, like having initially, like for example, if you see here, we have the subsection of the schema in the editor. We are planning to have an editor which can validate the entire Zowe.yaml and not just the subsection of it. And there are more things we are planning to add to this. And yeah, the last one is initialization. As I said, it's still in progress. So yeah, that's all about Zen. I think I can stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's see the next squad, VS Explorer, Trey.
Hi, everyone. This is Trey from the Zowe Explorer squad. I do have a couple new features that I'd like to demo for Zowe Explorer 2.11, but first I'm just going to talk about a new SDK package that has been released. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see this. It should be the Secrets SDK overview. So the Secrets SDK is a new development package that has been released alongside our existing SDKs. And it is available in Zowe CLI version 7.18 and above from the NPM package, as well as bundle 2.11 and above from Zowe.org. as well as Zowe Explorer and Zowe Explorer API for both v2 and v1. You can find it in version 2.10 and above for Zowe Explorer v2 and v1.22.5 and above for v1. The keyring module in this Secrets SDK package replaces Node keytar. As you may or may not know, Node keytar has been used for securing our credentials and is no longer maintained as of December 15th, 2022. As for the impact on end users for the Secrets SDK, CLI users should not be affected by this change. It's intended to be a drop-in replacement for Node keytar, so your existing credentials stored with Node keytar will still be accessible using the Secrets SDK. As for Zowe Explorer users, most Zowe Explorer users should not be affected by this change. However, some users that connect over remote environments using Zowe Explorer might be required to re-enter their credentials. This is because Microsoft will be removing keytar from their VS Code server for the October release, and Zowe Explorer will not be able to access the local credential vault while the extension is running through a remote server. This will affect remote SSH, remote tunnel, as well as remote Docker. I will link this article in the Zoom chat here, just for anyone that's curious to click on any of the links in that overview, or if they just want to get more information on this SDK. For now, I'm going to transition into the Zowe Explorer features. First, I would like to demonstrate the Edit Attributes feature that has been introduced for USS files and folders. So I'm going to quickly execute a search filter in Zowe Explorer to get to a test folder and file that I've created. Now, when you right-click on a USS folder or file, there is a new option, Edit Attributes. So if you click on that option, it will open a view where you can see the owner, group, and permission set for that folder or file. A user can choose to toggle off either the read, write, or execute permissions for a user, a group, or all permissions. And you can also choose to enter in either a owner name or a user ID. This supports both for the owner field and for the group field, whatever UID or user you would like to overwrite from the mainframe. So if I would right-click on a file here, this test file.txt, first I'm going to just show it in editor. You can see it's a sample text file that has read, write, and execute permissions for its owner and group, or 770. If I right-click on this file and edit these attributes, I can disable the write and execute permissions so that only the user and the group has read permissions for this file. Once I click Apply Changes, you will see that a dialog appears in the bottom right that says that the file attributes have been updated for this file. If I click Refresh in the top right corner, you can see that it updates the last refresh timestamp, and you can see that the permissions have not changed since I set them. Now, if I go to this file and I try to add a line, and I hit save, I will get an error back from OSMF saying that I do not have permissions for this file. So as I mentioned previously, this functionality works for not only files, but also folders. And we're hoping that this will prevent having to go back and forth from Zowe Explorer and a 3270 terminal just to modify permissions or attributes for a specific file or folder. Now I will demonstrate the overarching feature that the Edit Attributes feature uses, and this is the Enhanced Web Views feature. This will allow extenders or anybody that's using the Zowe Explorer API to create web views that leverage a certain JavaScript framework. So this is a sample extension that I created that just leverages the view framework as well as the Vite bundler or the Vite JavaScript bundler and Zowe Explorer API's web view class. So you can see here that I'm pulling in a web view from Zowe Explorer API, and I'm creating a new instance of this web view. And in this web view, you can also specify what messages you want to receive from the web view and how you want to work with those messages. So this basic web view just shows a little info dialog with the text that comes back from the web view. As you can see here, I just have a very basic view script that sends a message from the view web view that just says hello from view, as well as a little button here that dispatches that message. So I'll just go ahead and run that real quick. So since this is a very basic extension, I've just added a command that says hello world. And whenever you enter that command in and you execute it, it will activate the web view. And as you can see here, just have the header and the button that I mentioned, send message to Zowe Explorer. And as soon as I click this button, you will see here that a dialog appears in the bottom right corner. And this is a native dialog from VS Code. So we're hoping this will help extenders create views that they can also leverage data coming from Zowe Explorer. And the possibilities are endless in that you can use any sort of VS Code element, such as a table, like you saw with the edit attributes feature, or buttons or anything of that sort. Like I mentioned, you can use any sort of JavaScript framework. So whatever you're comfortable with will work in this scenario. I was using React for the edit attributes feature, but you can use Vue, Svelte, or any framework of your choice. And I believe that's it for my demo. Does anybody have any questions regarding the web views features or the Secrets SDK?
Okay. All right. Thanks, Trey. All right. The last presentation is VSC Explorer by Rudy.
Well, I'm just going to share my screen real quick. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Awesome. So today I'm going to be presenting 3 different things. So mostly to get started, I will be talking about the new API for notifying profile changes to extenders. So with this new API that we provide through the Zowe Explorer API, you can now define a function that can be triggered whenever making save to config file or a delete. So this also applies for creation as well. So one of the main advantages of this is that you're able now to pull as an extender any information from the config file that's new and be able to have that information up to date. So there is a couple of use cases for this, which I will go a little bit more in detail when I demo this. But for now, I guess a good example is when in the extender side of things, I provided also this screenshot with the function that we're providing for being able to define that and being able to pass in your own function that can be called whenever a save or creation or deletion is happening in a config file. So I'll go ahead and show that change. So just for a little bit of context, as you can see here, I have an environment with Zowe Explorer 2.9.0, which is the older version that did not include this change. But I also have another environment that has 2.11, although the change was introduced in 2.10. You should be able to have it on 2.11 as well. So, and I also have this extension of kicks for demo purposes on each environment as well, which also share the same config. So as you can see here, if I were to go into the Zowe config.json, I have this kicks profile that has kicks as a default. So you can see it here in the tree view as well. But if I were to change the name of it to a new profile and then change the default as well, you can see that nothing occurs in the tree in this older version because there's no way to be able to notify an extender that a change has been made to the team config profile. So the change has been made in the Zowe Explorer side of things, but you can see here that there's no updates within that extender or a way for it to know that this change has been made, which can lead to a certain amount of issues, but the main goal of that was to solve this issue. So as you can see here in the new environment, if I were to go into that Zowe config.json, I have already this kicks test. So now if we switch it back to kicks and we look over at this side, once I save, you can see now it switches back to kicks. So the reason why this happens is because I made the change. It's able to pick up those changes because I notify the extender upon a save. And this would be the same case if I were to remove the config file, or if I were to create a new config file, this would also trigger the function that you define as an extender. So this definitely opens a range of different possibilities for an extender to do. I think one of the main purposes of this that can be used is for being able to keep your profiles up to date, because I think one of the main issues as an extender is that sometimes when a change is made on the JSON file, it's hard to be able to pick up those changes or have your profiles up to date, so they can always behave with any changes that are made through the config file. So yes, so that's mainly the first change I wanted to talk about. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this before I keep moving on. All right, so we're going to continue. So the next topic I wanted to talk about as well is about the changes in version 3.0 and our current pre-release that is available in Zowe Explorer for extenders. So one of the main things is that version 1 YAML profiles are no longer supported. So this was actually deprecated in version 2, but now it's no longer supported in version 3. So just a good heads up for that one. And another list is the removal of deprecated APIs from Extensibility API for Zowe Explorer. So as you can see here from the bullet points, the logger type of message severity enum was removed in favor of message severity. The IUSS put content was removed in favor of IUSS put content, as well as the I just get jobs by owner and prefix was removed in favor of I just get jobs by parameters. And I command issue TSO command was removed also in favor of I command issue TSO command with params. And Zowe VS Code extension show VS Code message was removed as well in favor of GUI show message. And Zowe VS Code extension and input box removed in favor of GUI show input box. And finally, you can see as well that the Zowe VS Code extension for prompt credentials was removed in favor of Zowe VS Code update credentials. So these are a couple of the changes that we currently have for version 3.0. There's definitely some other things that we'll be adding along the way through pre-releases in version 3.0, but this is, I would say, the most impactful changes that we currently have for this pre-release. So I'm not sure if anyone has any questions regarding this as well before I move to the last slide. All right, let's move to the next slide. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is the Kubernetes Credential Manager plugin pre-release is now available. So you can see here that the following packages were published in NPM, the VS Code Marketplace, and also the OpenVSX. So you should be able to use this within the Zowe CLI as well as Zowe Explorer. I think a good way to be able to access this is just to look up the name of the Kubernetes Credential Manager within the VS Code Marketplace. You can look that up as Zowe Secrets for Kubernetes. And this plugin will allow you to store Kubernetes credentials on the cloud, which should be beneficial for certain browser users, because I know like some issues will come up with keytar users. Browser users that use keytar. So yes, that's mostly what I wanted to talk about. Is there any other questions that want to be asked about this presentation before I hand it back? All right, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so that was the last presentation that was on the agenda. Is there anything we missed or anything anybody would like to bring up?
Hey, Nick. Yeah, I would. I'll make a brief mention to some things.
Okay, go ahead.
So let's see, Sakshi showed today some of the cool stuff happening in Zen. So I guess my brief mention, here, I'll share screen. So I don't have the demo for this setup because it requires viewing the syslog, but I'll have that ready for you guys in the next system demo. But I wanted to make a quick mention for today because it will be ready in the next Zowe release that we now have sys messages support such that you can specify a message from the Zowe log that will go into your system log. So for example, here I have some specified default messages. This is now in the default example Zowe.yaml. So for example, say with this message, when it shows up in the Zowe log, this will now also print to the system log. Now how to do it is through this new sysmessages variable in your Zowe configuration YAML. So no demo for today, but wanted to make folk aware of that it is available for next release, and we'll showcase that in the next system demo.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if there's nothing else, then I'll give back half an hour. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you at the next system demo.